Hello devs, welcome back to Smile Square. In this tutorial, we will work on the UI for our main menu scene. Before we get started, I'd like to let you know that this tutorial, along with many other exclusive projects and resources, is available on our Discord channel. It's the perfect place to engage with our community and access exclusive content. Just head over to our Patreon to get instant access. If you find value in what we do and want to see more content like this, consider supporting us on Patreon. Every contribution helps us to keep creating and sharing knowledge with our amazing community. Alright, let's go back to our video. As you can see here, I have installed Unity Hub version 3.6.1. The Unity recommended version that we needed is 2021.1.9. To start, we need to hit the new project, hit the editor version, select 2021.1.9, name this one to alphabet tracing, make sure to select 2D, and hit create project. So this is what Unity 2021 looks like after you open the project. As you can see, this is our scene window, where you can select and position game object. If you want to zoom in and zoom out, you can use the mouse wheel. For the pen, you can use the middle mouse button to move like this. On hierarchy window, this is where we can see all the game objects on our scene. As you can see here, our scene is named sample scene, and it currently has one game object named main camera. And if you try to click this main camera game object, it will show all the various types of components, and by this it will do specific tasks, which this will make a game object works during gameplay. We also have here our project window, which we can see are different types of game assets. We may drag these assets into our scene and hierarchy window to make it appear on our scene. If you close this window by any chance, you may want to hit the window and go to General and hit the specific window you wish to open. So let's start creating our game. First off, we want to create a main menu scene. Go to Scenes folder, right-click here, go to Create, select the scene option, name this one to Main Menu. We also have here an existing scene named Sample Scene. Let's rename this one to Main Game. Let's open the main menu scene. Let's go to Assets folder. Let's create another folder here. Name this one to Scripts. Let's duplicate this folder by holding down Ctrl and press D. Name this one to Sprites. As you can see here, we have already made assets for this game. No worries, I'll upload these assets to GitHub so you can download all these assets if you want. You can find a link in the description below. Now let's open the Sprites folder. Select all these items. Drag all these items to our Sprite folder. Next, go to your hierarchy window and right-click here. Go to UI, select Panel. Name this panel to Main Panel. Change the transparency of an image to 100 value. Let's open the Sprites folder. Go to Alphabet folder, open the menu folder. Now select the main panel again. Drag this menu background to our source image. Next, right-click on our main panel and select Create Empty. Name this one to Content. Now go to Inspector window. On our Rect Transform component, hold down Shift and Alt, hit the anchor, and select Bottom Center. Change the value of width to 700 and height to 274. And change the Y to 80. Now right-click on Content Game Object. Select Create Empty. Name this one to Top Content. Now let's change the anchor to Top Stretch. Let's duplicate this game object by holding down Ctrl and press D. Let's rename this one to Bottom Content. Change the anchor to Bottom Stretch. Now right-click on Top Content. Go to UI. Select the button Text Mesh Pro. A Text Mesh Pro importer window will appear. Just click Import. Now let's rename this button to Start Button. Back to our inspector window, change the width for our Start button to 304 and height for 116. Expand the Start button. Let's change the text input to Start. Change the rect transform left to 40 and right to 40. Change the color of text to white and make sure to check the auto size. Set the font style to bold and uppercase. On your project window, go to Assets folder. Right-click here. Let's create another folder. Name this one to Fonts. I have also available fonts here. Select all these items. Drag these items to our Fonts folder. Now let's change the font asset of our Start button text to say Comic. On Hierarchy window, select the Start button. Now let's go back to our menu folder. Let's drag this button one sprite to our source image. As you can see here, our text is not showing. So let's select our Start button text. Let's change the max auto size options to 60. Now let's duplicate our Start button. Now let's rename this second button to Settings button. And for our third button, let's name this one to Quit button. Now let's move this Quit button to Bottom Content as a child game object. Now let's select our Start button and change the anchor to Middle Left. Select our Settings button and change the anchor to Middle Right. Let's also change our Quit button anchor to Middle Center. Now let's change the sprite of our Start button. Select this blue button. Drag this to our source image. Let's change also the color of our Quit button to red. Now let's change the text for our Quit button and Settings button. Now select the canvas, go to Inspector window, go to Canvas Scalar component, set the UI scale mode to scale with screen size. Set the reference resolution X to 1920. And for our Y, set this to 1080. Set the reference pixel per unit also to 0. We need also a panel that the player can choose in which category they wish to play. So right-click on our canvas and create an empty game object. Let's name this one to Category Panel. Now let's duplicate our main panel. Name this one to Categories. Now let's change our source image for our categories. Go to your inspector window. We can also select a sprite by clicking this radio button for our source image. Let's type here category _ BG Let's make sure to set the anchor for our category panel to both stretch. Now let's drag these categories to our category panel as a child game object. Now let's set the anchor to stretch. Let's remove these two child game objects of our category content. Select the content. Now set pause X to 86, top to 40, width to 694, and bottom to 40. Right-click on our content game object, go to UI, and select Image. Name this one to Category List. Set the anchor to middle right. Set the pause X to -6.1. Set the Y to 1.15. Now let's set the width to 540. And for our height, let's set this one to 719. Click the radio button, type category _ panel, right-click to our category list, and select a text. Name this one to title text. Let's change the text to categories. Change the font asset to Sugar Donut Line. Make the font style bold. Change the width to 250. Let's set the height to 61. Set the anchor to top center. And set the pause Y to -25. Go to Content Game Object. Right-click here. Now let's create a button. Let's rename this one to Back Button. Now let's change the source image. Type back. Let's set the anchor to top left. Let's set width and height to 116. Right-click to our category list. And let's create an empty game object. Name this one to Options. Let's change the anchor both stretch. Let's set our left to 90. And for our top, let's set this one to 152. Right to 90. And for our bottom, let's set this one to 105. Now let's duplicate our start button. Now let's move this button to our options. Name this one to alphabet option. Now let's select the options game object. Let's add a component. Type vertical, layout group. Now let's set the spacing to 21. And let's check the control child size width and uncheck the child force expand height. Now go back to hierarchy window. Select the alphabet option. Set the height for this to 97. Change the source image. Let's type here, button. Let's change the text of our alphabet option to alphabet. Let's duplicate 3 buttons. Let's change the text for these buttons. Now select the categories game object and go to inspector. Let's uncheck this one to deactivate this game object. Now we need a panel for selecting items to trace. In order to make that happen, let's duplicate this category panel. Let's name this one to choose item panel. Let's rename this to items. Activate this game object. Since we won't need these options for this panel, we'll just have to remove this. Now let's select the content. Set the anchor to stretch. Let's set the left to 40 and top to 40. The same thing for our right and bottom. Now let's select category list. Let's rename this one to items content. Let's set the anchor to middle center. Set the width to 1532 and height to 983.5. Set the pos y to -3.81. Let's also change our source image. Type here, choose underscore item panel. Let's also change the text for our title text. Change this one to choose. Let's set the width to 350. And for our height, let's set this one to 120. Make sure to check the auto size. Make the alignment to middle center. Back to hierarchy window. Right click to items content. And let's create an empty game object. Name this one to items list. Let's change the anchor to stretch. Set the left to 145. And for our top, let's set this one to 175.2. For our right, let's set this one to 145. And for our bottom, let's set this one to 113. Let's add a grid layout group component. Set the cell size both X and Y to 160. Set the spacing to both X and Y to 20. For the items, we need to create two prefabs. First, let's create a prefab for our text base. Right-click to our items list, and let's create a button. Let's name this one to item text based. Let's set the anchor to middle center. Let's change the source image. Type here, item. Now let's go to our text. Set the font style to say comic. Make this one to bold and uppercase. Check the auto size. Set the max for our auto size options to 100. Set our color for our text to white. And for our image-based item, let's duplicate this item text-based. Let's rename this one to item image-based. Let's remove the text. And let's add an image for our item image-based. On your project window, go to Assets folder, right-click here, and let's create another folder. Let's name this one to Prefabs. Now let's drag these items to our Prefabs folder to make it a prefab. We can now remove these prefabs. Now let's deactivate this item's game object. Right-click on Canvas, and let's create empty game object. Let's name this one to Settings panel. Set the anchor to stretch. Right-click on Settings panel. Let's create an image. Name this one to Background. Set the anchor to stretch. Let's change the color to black. Let's change the transparency to 80. Now let's right-click to our background game object. Let's create an image. Name this one to Content. Set the anchor to middle center. Set the width to 600. And for our height, let's set this one to 500. Let's change the source image. Type small panel. Right-click to our content. Let's create an empty game object. Name this one to sliders. Let's set the anchor to stretch. Let's set the left to 78, top to 147. And for our right, let's set this one to 78. And for our bottom, let's set this one to 102. Now right-click on our content game object. Let's create a new text. Let's name this one to title text. Set the anchor for this to top center. Set the pause Y to -25. Set the width to 302. And for the height, let's set this one to 70. Let's set our text to settings. Set the font style to bold. Change the font asset to sugar donut line. Check the auto size. Change the alignment to center and top. Right-click to our content game object. Let's create an image. Let's name this one to close button. Change the source image. Type close. Set the anchor to bottom center. Set the pause Y to -48. And for our width and height, let's set this one to 150. Let's add also a component. Type button. Select sliders game object. Let's add a component. Type vertical layout group. For our spacing, let's set this one to 3.4. Now let's check the control child size width and then check the height of child force expand. Right click on our sliders game object. Let's create an empty game object. Let's name this one to background music content. Let's set the height to 110. Right click to our background music content. Let's create a new text. Let's name this one to item title. Let's set the text to background music. Set the font style to say comic. Set this one to bold. Let's check the auto size and make the alignment to center and middle. Now let's set our anchor for this to top stretch. Let's set our left to 40. And for our Y, let's set this one to -20. For our right, let's set this one to 20. And for our height, let's set this to 40. Let's change the color for our text to brown. Now let's right click to our background music content. Let's create a slider. Let's set the anchor to bottom stretch. Set the left to 40. And for our right, let's set this one to 40. And for our height, let's set this to 56. Let's deactivate the handle slide area. Set the color of background to brown. Let's name our slider to BGM slider. Now let's set the value of our slider to 1. Select the fill area. Let's set our left to 2 for our top, right, and bottom. Let's expand the fill area and select our fill game object. Let's set the anchor to stretch. Instead of white, let's change the fill color. Now let's duplicate our background music content. Let's rename this one to sound effect content. Let's change this one to sound effect slider. Let's change the text for our item title text to sound effect. Now let's deactivate a background game object. Now let's create a loading panel. Let's just duplicate our settings panel. Name this one to loading panel. Let's activate our background game object. Let's remove our content child game object. Select the background game object. Let's change the transparency to 100 value. We'll have to change the color into white. And we'll have to change the source image. Let's type here, right_BG. Let's right click to our background game object. Let's create a text here. Name this one to loading text. Let's set the text to loading. Set the font asset to sugar donut line. Make it bold. Check the auto size. Now let's set our auto size options max to 100 value. Let's set our alignment to center and middle. Let's set our text anchor to bottom center. Let's set our pause Y to 51. And for our width, let's set this one to 600. And for our height, let's set this one to 115. Let's disable our background game object for our loading panel. Back to category panel, enable our categories. For our title text, make sure to check the auto size and make the alignment to center and middle. Disable again our categories game object. Don't forget to save our progress. So that was pretty much a complete for now. In the next part, we will dive into adding some scripts for our main menu scene. If you found this video helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up and comment down below, share with anybody you believe this might help. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button to be notified.